Good morning, everyone. I'm going to send a quick message to the rest of the members. Hopefully we can have enough folks to join us at quorum.
I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes, folks, and we'll get started.
Joel, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm going to give
All
it.
right, I'm talking on the phone and looking at you on my computer. So that might cause some reverberation later. And you don't want to hear me more than once. So just FYI.
We can hear you great, Bob. No
Cool. Okay.
Here,
Thanks.
I'll let you know if something. All right, folks.
Bob, you're looking good. I don't see you on your phone, so I don't see that connection. So you might be on audio on your computer.
How's
FYI.
this?
There we go.
Yeah, multimedia here.
Or too much media somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, gang. Let's go ahead and get started. I don't think we need to do intros today since we did them yesterday. But real quick, I know we've got a pretty packed agenda for today. We're going to be hearing, of course, from Amira on getting some updates. We're also going to be hearing from community organizations and hearing a lot about some of their legislative and policy work. I'm hoping we'll have some time as well to talk about our strategic plan and our work plan discussion. And then, of course, as always, we have public comment and closing. So given that we went a little over yesterday and we didn't have quite some time to discuss Nargiss's presentation, I'm hoping we could use these next 10 minutes for that. And then we can jump back into our usually scheduled agenda. Are folks okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I would just open it up, folks. If people have any thoughts or comments regarding Nargiss's presentation, go ahead. Valentina, I see you're on mute. You want to kick us off?
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you,
Sure.
Joe. Can you guys hear me just fine?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think Nargiss's presentation kind of illustrates the issues and concerns that farm workers have been having for decades. And one thing that there were many issues, but one thing that I think it's important to try to pick up and have continuous discussions around is collaboration between all the state agencies that somehow regulate some of the issues that impacts farm workers who live in labor housing. For instance, ODA, it's the state agency that regulates pesticide drift. And labor housing are surrounded by orchards and are often there's often drifts on the labor housing. Also, water quality issues. Which agency regulates that? And so it seems to me that OHSA, ODA, and others need to be involved in the housing rulemaking process, so that way we can have a good regulation come out of it. What I heard Nargess yesterday talk about is that some issues are being kicked to other agencies, and Oregon OHSA saying, we don't regulate that. It's another agency. And so I think that's a frustration that Nargess showed yesterday. And I believe that this is a one-time shot to get things right. The last time there were housing regulations was in 2008, and we were promised that in 2018 we would start that discussion again. And I believe that it did happen in 2018, but for reasons I don't know, things have been delayed. So farm workers have been waiting for 3 years. And the other thing is, it sounds that there's going to be a lot of opposition from growers. And there are a lot of issues, for instance, growers who provide labor housing are not required to provide kitchen. We have met a number of farm workers who live in motels in Southern Oregon, and they have to spend $20, $30 each day just to be fed because they can cook inside the motels and hotels. Also, there's no requirement to provide laundry facilities as long as there's a sink available in the labor housing. And also, the square footage ratio, we don't think it's adequate. I think one thing that we've been pushing for is 1 per 100 feet square. So there's a lot of issues, and I want to give an opportunity to others to just get your thoughts and questions. I know that yesterday, after a meeting, Oregon OHSA sent out a notice that they're going to pick up on the discussion around housing regulations. And I believe that they'll start having some sort of discussions in the middle of May. But again, if we're not including other state agencies in that discussion, then we're going to end up with similar problems that we continue to have here today.
Valentine, other thoughts?
Well, I would just, I appreciate what Nargis brought yesterday and Valentine just lifting it up. I mean, it was, Nargis obviously is a great advocate and laid it out pretty clearly, but it's, I felt a lot of frustration listening to that story. And I think especially after this past year, when the moment suited us, you're like, oh, farm workers so important and critical infrastructure and frontline and impacted by COVID and by smoke and by heat. And then we're back into this kind of bureaucratic mess that I forget exactly what Nargis said, but farm workers can wait. And I don't know what the best next steps are. I mean, I think where there's rulemaking, I think we need to be engaged. I agree with Valentine in terms of other agencies' involvement. And I guess in the back of my mind, I was like, how do we, is there like a summit we could have or something that really just outlines a pathway forward to protect this population that's so critical to so many aspects of our state economy, our wellness and wholeness as a state. And of course, our fellow siblings out there doing the work. So I don't know where we go, but it was really frustrating to kind of hear this kind of ongoing story that, has been many years around this table, in particular because of the great work of folks like Oregon Law Center, raising that awareness. So that's all I have to say. I'd really be interested in trying to figure out how do we take some action and leverage our power as limited as it is to move the work forward.
Yes, thank you, Ben, for your comments. And I would just add that one thing that exacerbates the condition is Oregon OHSA's approach to enforcement. It is a complaint-driven enforcement. And as we all know, farm workers are really afraid, they're really scared. There's a mistrust in government agencies. And so the likelihood that a farm worker would contact Oregon OHSA to file a complaint, it's close to nothing. That's why we have been assisting farm workers to file those complaints on their behalf. But when you have a substandard housing condition and you have the lack of enforcement, and even the lack of oversight when someone applies for a labor housing permit, if we don't have anyone going out there to inspect and make sure that the grower is complying with all the standards and we're issuing permits, that in itself, because it's an issue. And so I think there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed. But yes, I think that we need to see what are all of the problems that exist currently.
Any other thoughts from task force members?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. Valentine, I agree wholeheartedly with the statement that you made that state agencies do not cooperate across their silo boundaries. Um, I find that a lot. One agency says, well, this part's in my jurisdiction, but that's part of another agency's jurisdiction, and we don't interfere with their activities. We need to figure out a way to break down those silo boundaries so that agencies coordinate across their rules. And they just don't do that. They're afraid to cross over into another's territory. Secondly, as far as the conditions, if an agency licenses somebody, what are the inspection criteria or regulations? And then how can we maybe as citizen groups go in to help those that are afraid to file complaints? I know I filed a DEQ complaint against my neighbor 3 years ago because he had a gravel pit and he took a 2-story home, brought it up there in a dump truck and wanted to burn it. And it had the electrical, the roof, the asbestos. He's a state policeman. I'm still bearing the brunt of the state policeman doing an illegal burn. Luckily, my wife's sister is a federal DEQ air agent for the Nez Perce tribe in Moscow. She was able to run us interference. But when you file a complaint, there are repercussions.
Yeah.
And one needs to give those people cover. And I think that's part of the problem here is if I am somebody who's questionably legally in a country or a state, you're afraid to come forward to speak your mind. So how do we give them cover? What can we do to protect them? And I think that's part of our job is figuring out how do we create a shell? How do we create an environment so that the decision makers can hear what they need to hear? And I guess I'll end my rant right there.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? I have a few thoughts myself. Yeah, I think I mentioned yesterday that it's been pretty frustrating to see these issues have been around for so long. But I'm also really hopeful, and it brings me, a little bit of solace to know that Legal Aid has been advocating for workers for so long. But I'm also excited to see more fighters in the fight. When I first started in EJ in my early 20s, I sort of looked around and there was some folks, but there wasn't a ton, right? And the infrastructure wasn't as powerful as it is now. And this has been a long time issue. I wanted to show the folks, I've been reading this book called Mexicanos in Oregon by Marcela Mendoza, who's was an executive director of a local Latinx organization down here, and I've been reading this book, and I've just sort of the history of Latinx folks in Oregon, and I found in there that the Bracero program, right, when it was started in the 1940s during World War II, like it was a war effort, and Oregonians were encouraged to support the workers that came here. To support Oregon while folks were away. And then of course, after the war, the growers, were like, well, why have folks that can do in 2 weeks what usually takes other workers 3 weeks? And there was one particular chapter that I read recently that really caught my attention, which was that in the 40s, there were and Dr. Mendoza's an EJTF member. That's right. Yeah, she was on the Beyond Toxics board. So she interviewed me when I first interviewed at Beyond Toxics way back when. But and she's one of my mom's friends. I don't know. That's weird stuff. But yeah, there was one particular line that really caught my attention, which was in the late 40s. There were workers who of course were being advocated by their own governments, right, for better wages and better living conditions. and they were successful in doing so. And they had a lot of, work stoppages. And I know growers didn't like that. And so as we progressed in the decades away from the Bracero program, we see this emergence of growers depending on workers who are more vulnerable, workers that are no longer being advocated by the government, workers that I believe in the growers had a really successful legislative campaign in the 60s or 70s in which it was prohibited for workers to picket for essential crops. So just to say, like, this is as I delve deeper and deeper into EJ and into being an advocate, I see sort of this long history and trend of farm workers here in Oregon meeting the same sort of behavior and attitude that farm workers have been met with in this country for hundreds of years, right? Before, of course, with Black folks who are slaves in this country to, the New Deal in the 1930s, in which domestic and farm workers are left out of, the ability to receive overtime, which extends till today. So, being anti-farm worker is deeply rooted in Oregon's anti-Black history, and also in its history of oppressing workers from down south. And that's definitely a legacy of this country, in which, we have folks like many folks across the country that are still fighting for. But I do want to just preview for folks that we'll be hearing from Pioneros y Campesinos Unidos, PECUN, which is now a very different organization than when I first met them in 2015. They now have a really powerful and bolsterous staff. They've got some incredible bills, wide support from different organizations around enforcement, around minimum wage. So I think we're seeing a resurgence of advocacy for farm workers that this state hasn't seen in many years. Similar to, I think, the uprisings that happened for farm workers in California and the southern states. So I'm really hopeful about this advocacy. I'm excited for the EJTF to get hopefully some investments through the EJ bill. This has been a long time problem, and unfortunately there haven't been enough resources or people or capacity to tackle this issue, especially against an industry that has been so powerful and is very powerful in the state of Oregon. But those are just some of my comments I wanted to share with you all. Any other thoughts?
Well, yeah, I guess one, how do we take action?
We'll be hearing from like I said, some advocates later about some bills that we can perhaps testify at and provide public comment and all that good stuff. Amir, I know go ahead, Ben.
It also did seem, if I remember correctly, that there really was a gap in terms of the housing rules, and so I just want to make sure we're tracking that appropriately. So when the time comes, we're engaging fully, and if there is, some public advocacy we can do with Oregon OHSA or other agencies around rulemaking, particularly related to housing standards, I wouldn't want to miss that opportunity. So I don't remember exactly what some of the gaps were or where those were, but I think we need to acknowledge it. We should probably put together a communication to the governor, to Administrator Wood, just really outlining our concerns around the lack of kind of basic access to health and wellness and safety for farm workers as part of this continuing story.
I know Nargess sent us the I know Bob and I have it, but I'll forward it right now. Nargiss's presentation that has some more details in there. I think about those gaps you were chatting about, Ben. But I know, Amira, you had some thoughts about this.
Yes, thank you. So actually we have a couple folks from OHSA attending the meeting. So I don't know if you want them to come into the room to kind of help explain like the delay and things that are going forward with the rulemaking. So I will pop them into the room if they're able to talk. And I'm just gonna look at Renee because I think Michael Wood may have something in a couple minutes. But yeah, like I will say that my understanding of that the rulemaking being delayed is because of COVID. There was a need to take a pause on that rulemaking around March of last year, and now it's being picked up again, as you saw in an email notice that went out yesterday, I think during or after our EJTF meeting. Yeah, and I just want to say, you know, like, at least from the governor's perspective, he does care deeply about farm workers and the frontline communities that they are. And I think COVID really highlighted all the exacerbated issues that that community and population are facing in a very heightened way that maybe some folks were kind of blind to. And I think we're doing a couple of things now to try to right some wrongs that have been historic and trying to figure out where we can make an impact at the state level. I'll hand it over to Director Wood to see if he has anything to add in on, or Renee as well.
But before we go on, Administrator Wood, I want to go back to one of the questions I asked yesterday, because I do think this may be an area, again, where some of the, and I forget the name of the bill, I think it's the Recovery Act, but federal dollars coming into the state of Oregon. Some of those dollars can go to social determinants of health. And I think it gets, exactly what you were just saying. Like COVID exposed the kind of disgusting underbelly of inequities and racism in this country. And we have an opportunity potentially. I know, the farm folks aren't, farmers aren't represented, growers aren't represented around this table today. But that might be an investment we make in with federal dollars to improve housing, to build housing, to put in infrastructure that could be really supportive. And so I just want to make sure that we're part of those conversations in whatever way we can. I want to make sure that agencies are thinking about how, when any requests might be made to the governor about resources, they're thinking about some of the issues that have come up around this table. And this is one that should be right front and center. And I won't call it free money, but there's significant dollars coming into states and local jurisdictions to do exactly this type of work, to address social determinants of health, to respond to community capacity, to build capacity to address and respond and mitigate issues in the future. So I'll be quiet around it, but I don't want to lose that opportunity to make a case and to prioritize these frontline populations.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, Ben, and I was going to talk a little bit more about that during my update. I think it was yesterday, the governor put out a press release on her 10-point plan for some of the federal money that's coming from like the Biden administration to help mitigate a lot of these COVID impacts, very similar to the CARES dollars of last year. But she kind of laid out the principles that are going into decision-making for that funding. And I will say that there is a lot of competing interest for that pot of money, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. All right.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, I will try to keep my comments brief because I know you've got a full agenda, and I think some of this might be well suited to a future focused conversation with this group, and I'm certainly happy to do that. Let me just say at the outset that I agree with almost everything that Nargess said yesterday. Some of the things she said I might have said a little differently, and I certainly share the frustration. The historic inequity that plays out in agriculture is absolutely real. Now, I would suggest that it is less real in Oregon, and it is certainly less real with regard to safety and health in Oregon. In most of this country, if you work for a small farmer, you have no OSHA protection. If you die on the job site, there is no fatality investigation. That's clearly wrong, and it's approved by Congress every year. That's not the case in Oregon. We can't use federal dollars to do that enforcement. Fortunately, we have state dollars that allow us to do it. I will say that the feds do exercise jurisdiction over ag labor or over all labor housing. But if there isn't labor housing on an agricultural job site, it's simply exempt. The same sort of history that leads to the overtime laws that aren't within my silo, but that don't make any more sense to me than they do to Joel. I do want to mention a couple things. First of all, it's a little bit unfortunate. I saw the note go out literally as Nargess was speaking yesterday from my staff asking for information about availability to restart the ag labor housing discussions. I wish I could do things that quickly. It has been in the works for some time. And we've been talking about the fact that we were going to reinitiate those. So I don't think that really should have come as a surprise to the participants in that group. As Amira said, the reason we haven't worked on ag labor housing from the comprehensive rulemaking standpoint from the last year is simply COVID. There's a lot of things we haven't done over the last year. We also haven't had as great an enforcement presence as usual. However, we have done some targeted enforcement that was not complaint driven, specifically within agriculture. We actually, we have 2 emphasis programs that come into play in agriculture. And while we didn't do many inspections under our ag labor housing emphasis program, we did do several, and we weren't doing a lot of inspections anywhere, but we did do several inspections on our own initiative in field sanitation. The issues about it, I saw Bob's comment about broken promises, and I try to be very sensitive to issues about broken promises. That's why, and obviously she's reached a level of frustration about it, that's why we say at the outset when we believe things are going to be a tough lift, when we believe they'll be challenging or complicated, because they are challenging and complicated. The interplay of issues in housing in particular, when you talk about a water infrastructure that isn't just a matter of improving the pipes, but actually begins to start with things like water rights and pressure out of wells that simply, it can't just be casually expanded. And the fact that the folks who regulate water have varying jurisdiction over different housing sites depending on the exact nature of that water flow. We've actually been in conversations with them over the last few years, and we've shared information with them about sites, and they've realized that there are probably some small water providers who should be on their radar because of their labor housing who haven't been. And so that is one of the things that's going to change. We do operate within silos, but those silos are defined by our authority. It doesn't mean we don't talk to each other. And in fact, in the last year, obviously you've seen a lot of communication between Oregon Health Authority and Oregon OHSA and other agencies related to the COVID response. We have certainly actively coordinated. We've frequently been enforcing guidance. And while I sort of acknowledge all those issues are there, and like communication issues within and outside an organization, they are always there. You always need to work on them. They'll never be fixed. You never get to say, oh, we're done. We've now communicated perfectly and we can move on to something else. They're ongoing challenges. Certainly working collaboratively with other agencies are that sort of a challenge. We work very actively with the Oregon Department of Agriculture on pesticide issues. And we've tried to navigate those issues within the ag labor housing as well. The other thing that I wanted to just mention is that, and this was part of Nargess's presentation and probably one of the places where I would have emphasized something a little bit differently. we adopted a temporary rule specific to agriculture and labor housing last April. The Oregon Law Center was not happy with that rule. Some other advocates for workers were happier with it. The Oregon Law Center would have liked us to go further, and Nargess talked about her concerns. That was specific to agriculture. We were criticized by the ag community for focusing on them and not addressing other industries. We didn't adopt a comprehensive rule that applied to other industries until November. So while I understand, and there is certainly a historic reality to the statement that farm workers are always told to wait, last year, the rest of the industries, the workers were told to wait, and we acted in relation to farm workers. We also rolled out specific provisions in our current activity. We actually have a separate proposal for ag labor housing so that we could try to get it as right as possible in relation to COVID-19. And so that hearing is lagging slightly behind the comprehensive rulemaking that I talked about yesterday. I don't want to sort of get into this detailed, well, I would have rebutted this or this is different. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a framing for how things look from my side. And, truth is, I've been a government bureaucrat and regulator for more than 30 years dealing with issues related to worker protection and to farm workers. And I share some of the frustration about how hard it is to get things to change, not just in our regulations, but in behavior on the ground. And when you talk about our enforcement model, it is important to recognize that setting COVID aside, this last year has just been weird. It's changed everything. Outside that context, we have the ability in any given year now to inspect between 2 and 2.5% of the workplaces under our jurisdiction. That's the raw number. We inspect more ag labor housing sites than 2%.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that context. Any questions for Michael folks have on their mind?
Well, I'd just like to say, I appreciate the effort giving limited resources. Obviously we cannot do all the things we would like to do, but appreciate, Michael, you're keeping a focus on this particular issue. And I guess just ask, how can we kind of help? Because I know as you focus a light on one group of people, the light shines less bright on other groups of people. And it's important to keep everybody in the spotlight, but looking at the more vulnerable populations up front and moving on down that scale. So I just ask for myself, is anything I can do to help you to do your work better? Let me know. I'm in Northeastern Oregon. There's not much I can do. I'm one person. I know a few people, but I am concerned and I want to do what I can with the networks that I know. So please keep me in your loop and the rest of us, I think, in your loop so we can help out in the little ways that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. And certainly I'll take the opportunity on the specific. And I'll say, there's something else you can do and you already do it, which is hold my feet to the fire. These conversations like this probably aren't my favorite conversation, but they're important. And it is important, especially when you've been kicking around and doing this for 2 or 3 decades, to be reminded that the work is still important today and to bring my best to it. And you're absolutely right that the spotlight does need to shine on everyone, but it's most important that we look at vulnerable populations first. And there are a lot of different lines of vulnerability that intersect in the agricultural workplace.
Quick follow-up on that. So I appreciate that statement. And one of the things I often say to some of the folks that I work with is it's important for me to be both an ally and a target. And I guess, when you say hold your feet to the fire, I mean, obviously these conversations and kind of, I always appreciate you kind of voluntarily coming to get grilled by the task force. But is there ways to hold your feet to the fire that are more effective than others, right? And to all your points, right? How do you prioritize, right, the competing interests? And obviously we have a real focused interest on farm worker housing and those standards. And so, I don't know if you can answer that question, but where can we be more effective? Where can we give you the, if this is the right term, the political cover? Say, listen, if I don't focus over here, if OSHA doesn't focus over here, if we don't prioritize over here, like I'm going to keep getting my ass kicked. And how can we do that effectively? I guess, and maybe you have ideas, maybe you don't, but I do appreciate you naming it and encouraging us to continue along those lines. Thanks.
Well, we certainly can talk about broader discussions. I think it's probably worth mentioning to those folks whose ear you have and who have your ear that the regulatory process doesn't end with a proposal. And when there's a rule that I believe most workers support, and as I mentioned yesterday, I think the record right now on the COVID-19 rule is less than 3% supportive of regulation. It's not a vote, but it's good if there's a little bit of balance in that record. And as we move forward with the ag labor housing rule, that the hearings begin tomorrow, the COVID ag labor housing rule, that's important too. When we get to the point of rolling out a comprehensive ag labor housing proposal, agriculture worker advocates have historically done a good job of showing up for the hearings and really making sure that their voice continued to be heard, usually because they were not satisfied with how far we were going. So they were testifying in opposition from a different direction. But certainly the Oregon Law Center, Piccoon, and others have made sure their voices are heard, and I expect we'll hear from them on the labor housing. But that's part of the message, is making sure that that after having gotten the regulators to move forward on something, or at least consider moving forward on something, you don't leave us twisting in the wind.
I'll certainly say it'll be an ongoing conversation. I mean, I've had one-on-ones with Michael, with Ramon before he retired, and I imagine that as the years progress, we'll continue to have these conversations. So it's something that's ongoing. But I'm like I said, I'm heartened to see every year more and more policy that addresses some of these issues that is pushed by advocates. So. And I'm hoping that it'll continue to happen, so that, like Michael says, there's some balance. Any last thoughts? It's 9:42, and I want to make sure we get to the rest of our agenda. So maybe some closing comments from folks, and then we can move on.
Yeah, just some closing comments. I really appreciate Michael's comments. I met Michael back in 2004, I believe, when we brought together a group of Indigenous farm workers at Piccoon's building to talk about their concerns and issues. And I believe, I can't remember whether it was a Saturday or Sunday, but we had a really good discussion. So I respect Michael. Obviously, there's a lot of disagreement with the approach. But I have some, I guess one quick question I have for Michael is in the Ag Labor Housing Rulemaking Advisory Committee, do we have representatives from ODA, OHSA, DEQ, and other state agencies involved in those meetings?
I don't believe, the short answer to your question, Valentin, is no, I don't believe we've had them directly involved in those conversations. We certainly can reach out to them and do that. We have consulted with them and with folks from the Building Codes Division as specific issues have been raised. And I think at sometimes we've actually brought folks in from other agencies to present about their issues. But no, they aren't actually sort of sitting at the table with us.
Thank you, Michael. So I want to put forward just a thought, to the EJ task force members. a letter to the governor's office and the various state agencies that I think should be involved in these discussions, urging them to work in a collaborative effort to address many of the challenges that we've been facing. But that's just one idea that I have.
Is that a motion, Valentin?
I can make it a motion.
Someone want a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, motion passes. Any other closing thoughts before we move on? Okay, thanks, gang. Thanks so much, Michael, for being with us today. Appreciate you being here as always.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, folks. We have about half an hour until we have our community advocates come on. So now we've got some stuff around staffing changes, COVID check-in, some legislative updates. So I think that's you, Amira. Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, I have a couple of things to go over out of the governor's office. We've had a couple of staffing changes. So I'll just name the few that I can remember off the top of my head. Shannon Singleton, our housing policy advisor, will be switching roles to the Racial Justice Council Senior Policy Director. And Linda Roman, who was the Health Policy Advisor, will be moving to be the Racial Justice Council Policy Advisor. So those two are being teamed up into a dynamic duo to help the Racial Justice Council move forward starting now. And that's pretty exciting. So they're going to be working very closely on those issues and helping the Racial Justice Council move their bills forward and developing vision sessions for them. Another staff change that you'd probably want to know about is the addition of our executive appointments staff person. Mary Moeller used to be in that role, and our new addition is Shi-Un Kim, who is the executive appointments director. She is amazing, and she will be handling all executive appointments going forward. And right now she's building up those relationships with stakeholders and other people who are interested in appointments.
What was her name, Amira?
Shi-Un Kim.
Thank you.
We also have a new rep, y'all. Now it's District 47. Rep Valderrama was just appointed by the Multnomah County Commission. So we are now officially a majority women legislature.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I did not know it was majority women. That's amazing.
As of yesterday, yep.
Wow,
That's pretty cool.
that's amazing. That's good.
So I see a question from Quinn about the RJC's work continuing beyond the legislative session. That is the hope and the goal. There is a bill to codify the Racial Justice Council into statute, and I'm always forgetting what the bill number is, but I can find that a little bit later and put it in the chat. There was a hearing that happened on that bill, and overall some very positive responses to that. So we're hopeful that the work will continue in one way or another. Okay, so I want to talk about really quickly the speaking of the Racial Justice Council, the Environmental Equity Committee bills that are being monitored right now. Let me see if I can share the screen. And I will talk about 3 of these bills. So there are 5 bills that the Racial Justice Council is, the Equity Committee, the Environmental Equity Committee is tracking. I'm going to talk just about 3 of them, and well, I have slides for 3 of them, and then I'll briefly mention the other 2. So the first one you see here is House Bill 2171. This bill is our omnibus outdoor recreation bill that it means to enhance access to all for outdoor recreation in the state, which includes disabled communities, LGBTQ+, BIPOC, women with women, just generally families with children, and just other folks that may have difficulty in accessing the outdoors. The bill was scheduled for a work session on the 18th, and that committee went forward and it passed out of committee. I'm not 100% sure where it's headed to next. I think it's going to get down to the floor. No, I'm sorry, it's going to go to Joint Ways and Means Committee because there is a monetary component to this bill, and then it will make its way to the House floor and the Senate floor. Senate Bill 289, which is the Environmental Equity Committee's bill that they started off with. This is our Safety in the Outdoors bill that is meant to create welcoming atmospheres for communities of color, Black, Indigenous folks, LGBTQ+, and then other historically marginalized communities that may have been impacted by hate or prejudice. This would set standards for certain state agencies to be able to hold folks who have been convicted of bias crimes accountable if that bias crime was committed on state park land. And there are some accountability measures tied into that, including suspending, revoking, or denying permits related to outdoor recreation. The third component is making sure that there is some restorative justice measures included in that for the formerly convicted person to engage in community service or develop or gain some anti-bias education. This bill is scheduled for a work session on April 1st in Senate Energy and Environment. And then I'll talk about 2 more bills really quickly, and then I'll go back to the EJTF bill. There is House Bill 2475. Sorry. Which is the bill that authorizes the PUC, or the Public Utility Commission, to consider differential energy burdens and other inequities in affordability on rates. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about this bill later today with one of the community groups. And that bill passed the House floor and is now in Senate Energy and Environment. And then we have House Bill 2170, which unfortunately did not get scheduled for a work session in time for it to be alive. So that bill is currently dead, but we're working towards finding another solution or another vehicle to carry on the concept. That bill is related to water access and the governor's 100-year water vision and just continuing the work around built and natural infrastructure. Then going back, so Senate Bill 286 relating to environmental justice, I think this is the one that folks are probably most interested in. Special shout out to Quinn for helping me work through the amendment on this bill. Just so folks know, this bill would increase authority and capacity for the EJTF, changing a couple of things like where it's housed, so it'll be under DEQ, but still maintaining its relationship to the governor's office and having a relationship reporting to the EQC. It also changes the name to an Environmental Justice Council. The bill would also create some accountability measures around environmental justice. One, by enhancing the report that agencies already have to complete to the task force and just elevating that a little bit more. Also asking the task force to revamp or redevelop the best practices handbook and develop a report to agencies about how to best engage community, given all the environmental justice issues and groups that would be interested. It also creates an environmental vulnerability assessment tool, which DEQ would work to develop in consultation with other agencies and this Environmental Justice Council. Speaking about getting out of silos and agency silos that Jim, I think you mentioned earlier, this bill is really meant to try to hone in on that collaborative and co-creation needs around environmental justice, particularly between all the natural resource agencies. So in the original bill that created the task force, there are a list of agencies that are considered natural resource agencies. And some have been removed, like Department of Education, but others have been added, like Department of Energy, Parks, and Dogami is back in there as well. And then it also continues the work of the interagency work group on climate impacts on impacted communities, which again is a collaborative effort between different state agencies to look at what climate justice could look like for each of their agencies. The work session for this bill is on the 25th. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Senate Energy and Environment. I'm going to pause there really quickly before I address the DEI positions and centralized versus separate question that Ben had asked yesterday, and I think earlier today.
Any questions?
The only thing that I'd like to ask, and this might be involved in the discussion, is yesterday Quinn and I had a little, well, I put something in the comment, Quinn responded, I sent it in an email this morning. But with the DEI positions, it seems like there are a lot of them occurring in state agencies. And do we have like a baseline or some type of mechanism across those positions that can break down the silos to enhance communications across agencies on common issues of coordination? I don't know if that's occurring, it very well could be, but that's just something I want to put out there to have in the back of our minds as we move forward. Thanks.
I'll just add really quickly, I really appreciate that, Jim, and it'll be interesting to see. I think there's a couple things that have been coming up for me as one, job descriptions, who's assessing candidates. We're going from 0 to 60 for some of these agencies. So I'd be really interested in the kind of role EJ Task Force, and certainly speaking on my other hat as Commissioner for Black Affairs, I think the advocacy commissions would be very eager and interested to engage in that process and inform those decisions. The other thing I would just say really quickly related to what you said, Jim, is that I've served on the National Steering Committee for the Governing Alliance for Racial Equity, which works with hundreds of jurisdictions around the country, including some of our state agency partners. And one of the best practices that you see in many jurisdictions, including Multnomah County, is what you might call an equity core team, or kind of an equity council, or some alignment where all these type of positions are being able to come together to think both, agency, department, division specific, and kind of across all these disciplines. And so, I do think that's something that, the state would be really benefit from is exactly what you're describing, is ensuring that folks are not kind of just doing their work in isolation, but have a formal way to come together, structured and supported at a central, from a central perspective. So we'll keep tracking that. Certainly at our next Commission on Black Affairs meeting, I will be raising that issue and doing whatever we can to ensure that we're not seeing these kind of one-off and people just kind of working in isolation. So appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So there is a bigger effort at the state enterprise level with the Department of Administrative Services to create more of a centralized hub around DEI. Some of this work has been happening directly in the governor's office with our equity office, which Support Chang, who's now working at Business Oregon, was lead on. And then there's a couple other staff members that we have, including Annie and Steve Lee, who are still continuing that work around equity. I really appreciate what you were saying about the need to have like a centralized hub around DEI. And in the development of the governor's budget, there was an interest in making sure that those efforts were coordinated between agencies. And we actually had that question of, should we centralize this under like an environmental equity office, or should we put DEI positions directly in agencies? And we decided to take that route and have positions directly in state agencies, because each agency is dealing with their unique individual issues. And there may be agencies that are at different levels of understanding around DEI, so their needs could be different. So instead of having just one or two people sort of generalized around DEI overall, we wanted to make sure that these positions were embedded directly into the agencies so that they could help assist with whatever unique issue the agency itself is dealing with. Diversity, equity, and inclusion may look very different for fish and wildlife than DEQ. And so this is our first go around to try to get these permanent positions in the agencies. There is also the hope that an Office of Environmental Justice will be created as well. That will take some time to figure out, because there is a fiscal ask on that bill, as you can see in the second bullet. That would create an office for $2 million, and then an additional $1 million would be for the cumulative impact analysis or environmental vulnerability assessment that DEQ would lead on out of Senate Bill 286. So the hope there is that at least there'd be like one centralized spot to talk about environmental justice, but the conversation around DEI is much larger for the entire enterprise. So we thought it would be better to have individual positions at certain agencies as a first round, right? This is our first go round of this, and hoping that it's successful, but it has to go through the legislative process. Any other questions or comments about this piece?
Yeah, well, I just want to share something about DEI positions, because I see in my work with the OPUC that many utility companies are including DEI positions within their IRP transmission portfolios. And I think it would be advantageous if, as they develop them, if we could share some of the state's common bonds about DEI, so that there are common values that can be shared across the state to the independently owned utilities and whatever other, businesses that might be working with different state agencies, so that we at least at the ground level, and we're probably past that, but start to form some common definitions that we can all work off of. Because I think having a common language is important as we move forward. And I think that we might be, maybe there's other folks, we might be the ones that might be able to set that theme. And I think we should think about that amongst ourselves and what guidance can we give? What guidance do we want to give? So that's my 2 cents on that issue.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jen. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds, because I think one of the things speaking from my own position, it is easy. I think we heard this from some of the agencies. It's easy to get inundated with internal and inward focus, right? When folks start looking at these positions and saying, okay, as a person of color, I'm over here suffering every day in this organization and being treated differently, right? Our HR practices, are not resulting in diverse hires. People aren't being promoted. We're not retaining people of color. But you could spend, if we're talking about 1 or 2 positions maybe per agency, it'll be interesting to see kind of where the priority and focus ends up being, right? And there's a ton of work, right? If we take the kind of D&I work, that's largely been kind of a human resource focus, primarily for many of these positions. What is the capacity to actually kind of think about equitable practice and transformation when it relates to community involvement and engagement, and capacity building and empowerment, right? So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm full on board. So hopefully my comments do not sound like, Debbie Downer. And I'm suspicious, right? Like how we design these and how we structure them and how we support these individuals is going to be really important. So, I think there's, we'll have to find our links. I think there's a really good opportunity to connect these folks, as the advocate, to think about the role and relationship of environmental justice. But I worry for some of these folks that are going to be coming in and have, we write job descriptions that are for a team and we hire 1 person. And I think that is consistent across the country. Jurisdiction after jurisdiction is doing the same thing. And I've been a broken record on this. You can't just hire 1 person and expect them to take on all of the different aspects. And even as we heard it yesterday, folks talked about HR and they talked about embedding equity into everything we do. And it's like, okay, these are high expectations and these folks are going to need some support. So I'll shut up, but I'm excited for it. And I think we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to what this work looks like and help agencies figure out priorities for where that work goes.
Yeah, and to that point, without saying too much, because this isn't my process, but Serena Stoudemire is like the chief equity officer out of DAS, and has started to convene a table of high level Black, Indigenous, people of color employees within state agencies to discuss those very issues that you just mentioned, Ben, around recruitment, retention, and work culture and environment, and also just building a network between each other. Speaking of agencies working in their silos, we often do that. And it's really nice to just connect with people who have been doing state work for years, or just new to this field, but are coming from another state or another form of government, or like a nonprofit, or et cetera. And just building those connections between us as a state enterprise is really, really powerful. And our next step is just to figure out what it is we're going to focus on as a group. And those conversations happen, I think, at least once a month. And then I see a comment in the chat around the interagency work group. So that group was created out of the Executive Order on Climate Change, or EO 20-04. Bob sits at that table, so thank you, Bob, for joining that group. And that could also provide some sort of structure around climate equity, at least between the agencies and the state bodies that are doing that type of work to continue to move forward, which is also in Senate Bill 286. Okay, and then I will just talk really briefly about the governor's announcement on that federal funding that you all were asking about. So yesterday, the governor released a 10-point economic recovery plan for Oregon. And this 10-point plan was developed with input from the Racial Justice Council and the governor's economic advisors to build off of local economic development districts and help Oregon families and businesses move forward after the pandemic. There are specific principles that the governor will be using to determine how investments will be made out of the federal American Rescue Plan resources, or the ARP funding. These principles for an equitable and rapid economic recovery are laid out in 10 points, like I said, and I can put the link in the chat after I'm done with this. The first one is to invest in Oregon's hardest hit workers, including those that are currently unemployed or underemployed. 2, reinvesting in innovative housing. 3, supporting resilient rural communities. 4, supporting Oregon's workforce, those who are currently employed but struggling. 5, creating opportunities for Oregonians around like workforce development. 6, getting small businesses back on its feet. And 7, investing in Oregon's infrastructure. 8, Oregonians investing in Oregon. 9, safely reopening Oregon's economy. And 10, innovation and manufacturing. These principles lay out the beginning conversations that will happen. And the governor is talking to the legislature, community stakeholders, the Racial Justice Council, and the Governor's Council on Economic Advisors to develop a process for funding and the decisions of that as well. Any initial questions? And in the interest of time, I will just, like I said, put the link of that 10-point plan in the chat. Cool. I'm not hearing any. But if you all have ideas about where you would like to see this federal funding go, please feel free to reach out to me. I already heard about, maybe some resources for the farm worker community could be an idea.
Well, I heard something, Amira, that you mentioned at number 4 about rural communities, but I want to see the list first because it sounded somewhat like, if you're not trying to help yourself, we're not going to help you, or something like that. Enabled rural communities. There was something in the wording that my ear picked up that didn't sound exactly right, but I want to see the exact wording before I really comment.
Yeah, so I said supporting resilient rural communities. If you look at the language, that means supporting local government and planning and growth through economic development strategies, implementing targeted forest health strategies, investing in community colleges, and supporting agriculture economies. And those are just starting points of where the conversation is going.
Right. It's just sometimes that the word resilient is some of our cities and counties are so understaffed and underfunded that they can just survive. They don't have the opportunity to be resilient. So that's why I want to look at the wording a little bit is how do we help them become more resilient to be capable of absorbing this funding and actually doing something constructive with it? And that's my concern because I know we just work with our county planner. We got stuff back in the 80s that are still on the books that have not kept up with the state mandates. And many of our rural counties just don't have the capability to keep up. So that's kind of what piqued my interest in seeing how can we help them be who they want to be and maybe give them more resources to do that. So I'll leave it there until I read more.
Point taken. Thank you.
Amira, thank you for sharing this with all of us here today. I'm especially excited about number 2, reinvesting in innovative housing. I just want to make sure, how can we ensure that those decision makers have the adequate information, data, that it's going to determine where the money will be going to. I'm just afraid that some people may be left out if we're not doing a good, solid evaluation of needs in terms of housing. I know that there's a group of community-based organizations and institutions that have been contacting research with farm workers regarding all of the different effects of COVID-19 that includes also housing. And so I like to make sure that that data is used in these discussions.
Yes, thank you. And I think that was all I had.
Sweet. Thanks, Samira. All right, gang. Moving on. It's 10:16 right now, so I think we have some community legislative updates. But I know that we have a lot more to go through, and I want to make sure that advocates are able to get in and out. So real quick, if we could just break for like 5 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get started with community updates, so that folks can be on and have their time. I don't want to interrupt them in the middle of their flow. So quick 5 minutes, if folks can be here like 10:21, 22, around there, we'll get started. And I know Beyond Toxics is here, so we'll start with that. I'll see y'all in 5 minutes.
This is what I was going to say.
All right, gang, let's go ahead and get started. So I know we've got a few advocates with us that want to present. But we'll start off with Lisa Arkin from Beyond Toxics.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you.
Morning.
Well, I bring good news, so that's always a lovely thing to start off. Well, we're midweek. What am I saying? Get us going through the week. Yesterday in Senate, in Energy and Environment Committee, the Senate Concurrent Resolution 17, which is to propose an environmental justice framework for the state of Oregon, passed unanimously out of committee and will be sent to the Senate floor. Strangely enough, and happily enough, Senator Finley made the motion to pass the bill. It was unanimous with Senator Finley and Senator Art Robinson joining in with Senator Beyer, Senator Taylor, and Senator Dembro to send the bill on. Senator Dembro will carry it to the floor. I just want to thank the people who spoke to the bill. Thank you, Quinn, for your eloquent, excellent testimony, as well as staff member from Senator Jama's office and Senator Manning, Ira from Picun, doing this off the top of my head, Anna Molina, and I'm missing, Eric Richardson, there we go, from NAACP, Eugene Springfield, and the astounding testimony, written testimony that was submitted by Bob Collin and Robin Morris Collin. That was just like stellar. And so it was great, a great hearing, really was a marvelous hearing. So on it goes. Maybe there'll be a floor vote in 2 weeks, as long as everything stays on track. And I don't know if you're familiar with the resolution, but has some really great language in it. For example, I'll just read one from the whereas section. Whereas frontline communities are Black, Native American, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and immigrant and low-income communities that historically and presently experience the brunt of health, economic, and ecological impacts, and have been made more vulnerable to the consequences of climate change because of these factors. There's one whereas. Another one is, whereas frontline communities historically have been excluded from policy and funding decision-making, and Oregon therefore must prioritize and empower these communities as valuable and equal decision-making partners in generating durable, creative, and equitable policies to promote environmental justice and respond effectively to climate change. So I urge you to, read it for yourself. I won't take up your time this morning, but I think it supports all the things that your task force is doing and hopes to do in the future. And I hope this can be useful, assuming that it passes on and is adopted finally. I hope it can forward and lift up the work you're already doing. Any questions on just the resolution? Okay, all right. And then the other thing I'd like to report on is House Bill 2488-2.
I think Quinn had a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, Lisa, I just wanted to thank you so much for your work and your leadership on this resolution. I had several experiences testifying in various hearings over the last couple of weeks that just reinforced for me how necessary it is, and that we can't take it for granted that these messages are understood, that they're assumed, that they're integrated into policymaking. So I am looking forward to continue working to support this, and just want to thank you for all of your work on it.
Thank you. We feel, again, we have to assume that it's going to go the whole distance, but just to have this as a conversation in the legislature and have the legislature step up. And then we have to use it. That's the next thing, is it has to be used to create other kinds of work that we all want to see get done. And yes, it is SCR 17. Did I say something not that. Sorry if I misspoke. And you can find that on the website, of course, of the Senate E&E, or just by searching SCR 17. The other bill that is of interest, I hope, to the task force is House Bill 2488-2. This is the climate justice land use planning goal. So there are 19 statewide land use planning goals that were implemented in the 1970s. So they're now 50 years old. This would be the first time we're adding a new goal in almost 50 years. And the goal is goal 20, and is specifically to address climate and equity all together in one goal. And I want to thank Amira for her guidance in this as well. This is so far doing well, but it's early on in the process. It's had one public hearing that was just fantastic, but we didn't have the -2 amendment out on OLS yet, so the committee members were a little confused as to what the bill actually was all about. The second hearing is scheduled for this coming Monday in House E&E, chaired by Rep. Pam Marsh. And then the work session has already been scheduled for April 7th, so that's a good sign that it seems to be assumed to be moving forward. We've tried to align definitions in that bill with some of the definitions of environmental justice in Senate Bill 286, I think it is. So that we're working in tandem with you all on the one that moves the task force into DEQ. And I believe that House Bill 2488 will, if adopted, will make a huge difference for equity in decision-making. But you know, this one is land use planning, but it's going to spill over to many things. The hardest obstacle we face, the biggest criticism, and actually the only criticism we've heard so far, is that the $800,000 that has been set aside in the governor's recommended budget for climate equity planning is insufficient. And that's not coming from the Department of Land Conservation Development. They're not saying that. They're saying that with the $800,000, they can use this biennium to create a rules advisory committee, which in the bill itself has to be diverse. So that's spelled out in the bill. And then that RAC would help create the language for goal 20, the actual goal. Then there'd be hearings all over the state, a minimum of 5 hearings. Then the department brings back all that fact finding back to itself in the RAC, and then proposes a final goal 20 to the commission, the LCDC commission. Then the commission holds a hearing, and then hopefully will adopt the goal by the end of this biennium, before the end of this biennium. So all of that can be covered in $800,000, which is, I think, quite a deal. The agency is giving us a good deal on this. But then the criticism from opponents is, then what? Where's the funding to help local governments implement the land use goal? And we just kind of don't know how to answer that, because we're assuming there'll be money from the feds, but we can't promise it. I'm not a guru on budgets, not my forte, and I don't know how to create budgets for future bienniums out of nothing. So there you have it, but we really would appreciate support, especially when it gets to Ways and Means, which is where it will go directly if it passes out of House E&E. So then we have Senator Johnson and Senator Steinwert Hayward to try to convince, and that might be a lift. So happy to answer any other questions. Or any advice you have on budgets.
Any questions? Thanks, Lisa. Let us know when things are coming up. I think while the task force can't directly endorse bills, we can testify and provide comments on bill. So I actually think there's something coming up on Monday. Yeah.
There is something coming up, and well, we were going to tap you on that. However, we've been told by the chair that there's not enough time for extra testimony. So chances are there's no time. We're just going to explain the -2 amendments and have the agency speak to the bill and the budget.
That's good.
Thank you for being willing, though.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, we can always submit written testimony as well. Yeah, that's a good point, Ben. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts about this bill before we move on?
Actually, Chair, I have a question. If it wasn't addressed, what would be the impact of Resolution 17? Sorry, I was having audio issues, so apologies if I missed this for some reason.
Is that for me? That question? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. The impact of a resolution is like any statement of principles. It's what you then decide to use it for. Not you personally, Amira, but the general you, all of us. Because if it's adopted in a bipartisan fashion, as it was passed out of the committee in a bipartisan fashion, it's a commitment. So everybody's on board with the principles expressed in the resolution, supposedly, and then it can be used to promote legislation that is legally binding. And we were really aware that in this cantankerous time, it might be good to start with a joint resolution as a way to introduce and have conversations about these topics. So I think that the resolution, the outcome of it can be to use it, to quote it, to attach it to other actions that cities might take or organizations might take, or that we ask the legislature to take. So I think that is the purpose of resolutions, is to raise the bar for what we expect of our own governments, our own selves, our own communities, to respect people and to uphold these principles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm just curious, what's the hope? Let's say this bill passes and this resolution passes, and we have this sort of this values principle. I guess what's the idea in terms of how land use would change moving forward? Just 'cause I've taken a look at it too, and it's a great great values principle. And I think it's a great guidance for folks to look to. But I think one of the things that has always eluded a lot of EJ advocates has been, we have values principles. Sometimes we even have policies, right? But without enforcement or the ability to hold, I guess, agencies or people accountable for stuff, it's difficult. It's difficult to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's two things. One is the resolution, and one is House Bill 2488, which would be legally binding, and taken together, they're really strong. So House Bill 2488 has a whole bunch in there. If you look at the -2 amendment, the equity piece in section 2, I think, is pretty strong. And so that will require all cities and counties, no matter what their size, to adopt equity requirements into their land use planning. So their comprehensive plans, their land use frameworks, when they rezone land, all of that now will have to have an equity framework, and any kind of rules advisory committee or land use commission that they convene has to be diverse. So that's great. And as for the resolution, I really see that working much like the guidance that the EJTF has put out. I attend lots of RACs, lots of meetings from agencies, and I hope you're proud of how many times agency staffers quote from the EJTF materials as a guide. Like, your handbook is not legally binding. However, it's being used frequently as a guide and as a way for agencies to circumvent, I would say, no, that's not the right word. A way for agency staff to raise up issues that, let's say in my case with Clean Air Oregon, that air polluters might not like to have in there, like community engagement and a process to bring community members who are impacted into the decision-making process. You know, that's really upheld by the TF and in your documents. And though it's not legally binding, it's being used a lot. So that's a great contribution you all have made. And I hope the resolution will be the same, that people point to it and say, this was adopted by our legislature, hopefully bipartisan, and these are the guiding principles for our state.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. It's really helpful. I see we have Oriana Maniera here from Verde. So Oriana, you want to update us?
Chair,
Yeah.
sorry, I just had one more follow-up, and I thought I saw Bob's hand, Vice Chair.
Sure.
Bob's hand as well. You know, I think 17 and 2488 are really important bills, but there also could be some overlap with 286 and how they interact with each other. So just something to keep folks in mind about those bills.
Good to know.
Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah.
I wanted to say about 17 that hasn't been raised anywhere, is that, like best practices, and it's a point you've raised in earlier meetings, that there are communities that don't have organizers. There are unrepresented, vulnerable communities that don't have a community leader, that have the values, the actual values that are in this, but don't have a person in place. So by having something like this, when they don't have a Hoal Eboa, when they don't have someone, can really help empower communities that we missed. And that's why I feel personally, we feel personally pretty strongly about it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob. Appreciate those comments. Okay, Oriana, I know you're here to chat with us about a few bills, so go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, for the record, my name is Oriana Rivera. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Energy, Climate, and Transportation Manager at Verde. Thanks, Chair Eboa and members in the Environmental Justice Task Force for having me here today. I'm just going to provide a few updates about the 3 bills involved in the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign, which some of the organizations represented by folks here are involved in. The Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign has been an opportunity to put frontline leadership at the fore of climate and energy policy in the state. And that's centered around two things. One is a package of 3 bills, which I'll talk about. And then the other piece, which I'll talk about first, is an Energy Justice Leadership Institute, which is an opportunity for community members from around the state. We have over 100 folks participating in both English and Spanish to learn about energy and energy policy, and to figure out how to take that knowledge and capacity building that they're doing and apply it through advocacy around the 3 bills in the campaign. And we're hoping to have future versions of EJLI that are more project incubators or policy incubators, and opportunities to really create a statewide base of community members who are really excited about energy policy in the state and can be a strong force for more community-led work in the future. The three bills that we're working on are House Bill 2475, which is an energy affordability bill. It's floated around session for the past 2 times. Many folks in the space have offered testimony and support or been involved in meetings, and we're really grateful for all of the capacity that's gone to moving this bill forward. It does 2 important things. One, it allows for differentiated rates, which is just a fancy way of saying different rates like discounts or rate structures to address energy burden. And the second piece is it creates a pot of intervener funding for community organizations like mine or like Lisa's that can participate in Public Utility Commission proceedings and represent environmental justice communities. So these are 2 really, really important things, one on the process side and one on just the affordability and cost equity side within our energy system, because we know those costs are not currently balanced. And we want to take some relief off of the folks who are most burdened by our energy system. The bill successfully passed the House with bipartisan support, which we're really, really grateful to continue to have, despite some bumps along the way. We're currently on the Senate desk, Senate President's desk, and going to be referred to Energy and Environment, and expect to have a smoother path through the Senate to finally passing the bill, which will be really exciting because last session we were 2 days away from passing. Session fell apart right as our first reading was supposed to, or second reading was supposed to happen on the Senate side. So that was really, really tragic, but we feel confident we'll be able to pass this bill and provide much needed rate relief for folks for whom this has been really exacerbated during the pandemic. And I'll run through all of this and then answer questions from folks rather than pausing in between. So House Bill 2842 is a healthy homes bill. That's also a concept that's floated around, but I think been adapted and framed in more of an environmental justice lens. It would allow for a pot of funding to make health and safety upgrades of any kind that are needed for homes around Oregon. Currently, we have weatherization dollars, which can only be used for insulation, for heating and cooling systems, for duct sealing or air sealing, but not necessarily to replace carpet that's trapping asthma triggers or address mold abatement or seismic resiliency or fire hardening, or many of the things we know need to be done in people's homes. And ensuring that we have a funding stream to make that happen. We're asking for 20 million. Which seems like a large number, but that's the annual spend for community action agencies and weatherization. And so we know that we have a huge need and are also confident with some of the federal funding coming down that we'll be able to support the bill, potentially without drawing from existing general fund dollars. And we've been adopted in the speaker's housing package and housing priorities. So we have some strong support from leadership for this particular concept and bipartisan support. We have bipartisan sponsorship on the bill, which we're really proud of, including Representative Zika, who will be hearing the bill for a work session in the House Housing Committee in a couple of weeks. And then it will go sit in Ways and Means, but we're confident that this bill can pass as well. And then our final bill, which is kind of a beast, is 100% clean energy for all, and trying to take an environmental justice lens and applying it over the bill. That started out as House Bill 2995 and has become a vehicle of House Bill 2021, which is a little bit more of a legislator vehicle. The -1 amendments of that bill didn't completely reflect some of the needs of our coalition, and we're working hard to get a -4 that will be more reflective of the needs and values and opportunities for communities around the state as it comes to the transition to clean energy. So I ran through that all pretty quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the Energy Justice Leadership Institute, about the bills. We had our first hearing for 2021 on Monday. We'll have another one next week and then have a work session scheduled soon after that. And we're hoping again to land a really strong amendment that everybody working on the bill can be really proud of.
Thanks so much, Oriana. Any questions?
Well, I guess I just like to say that the Energy Leadership Institute I find to be valuable because We've got 2 folks from Union County and 2 folks from Umatilla County that hopefully are going to join our Oregon Rural Action Energy team. Because for us, one of our big concerns is we're with customer-owned utilities, COUs, not IOUs, which are not regulated by the PUC. So we don't have a lot of the advantages of the Oregon Energy Trust or programs like that. I'm thankful to Oriana and the group for including some of our Eastern Oregon folks into the process. And Joel, you're there. You kind of mentored our group one Thursday when Oriana was not available. So do appreciate the energy that you guys are putting into building a statewide coalition around energy issues. And I'm thankful that I've been able to connect and get Eastern Oregon involved in the process a bit more. So I thank you both for all the work.
Thanks so much, Jim. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yes, this is Ezel Watson from Oregon Public Utilities Commission. And I just want to ask a little bit more about House Bill 2842 and how it can be used for renters as the current language states. Are renters actually able to make the request for funding, or does the property owner have to make that type of request?
So as Gabrielle Goldfarb noted in the chat, the grants will go from Oregon Health Authority, which I failed to mention will be the agency administering if the bill is successful. Those grants will go to community action agencies or nonprofits, housing authorities, tribal governments. We have like a long list of different entities that already do this work who are named in the bill. They will get the grants, and then they will be able to apply those funds to either homeowners or renters. So rather than it being the homeowner themselves or the renter or the landlord applying for the funds directly from OHA, different agencies will be able to work with their communities in a flexible way. And as I also noted in the chat, OHA will be able to make rules that can apply some renter protections or things to address the split incentive, that issue where improvements that are made to a property that's not occupied by the owner, especially from an energy savings perspective, will benefit the tenants, but not the landlord. And so there's sometimes not an incentive to do that work. So there's a whole realm of renter issues that we're hoping may be addressed, but don't want to be prescriptive around in statute, so that there's some flexibility, and that in particular different entities doing the work can work with OHA to figure out what works best and what provides the maximum benefit for the folks who need this work to be done.
I appreciate that, Oriana. I'm looking for converging interests in ways that the PUC can leverage our relationship with utilities and our community action agencies to help. So I think what we've uncovered recently are a lot of energy inefficiencies that our customers face as a result of just the type of properties that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much. I hope that I just trying to learn and I'm a little bit new, so forgive me if these questions are answered in the chat. Forgive me, please.
No problem. Thanks. They're really good questions, and I'm glad to get them on the record.
Thanks so much, Amir. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to update us. Okay, I know we have Bakun with us today, but we may need to send them a new link. I think they're in as an observer, not an attendee or panelist.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Ira on the
Sure.
attendee list. If someone from Cocoon is in the attendee room, could you just raise your hand so I could bring you over?
Yeah, I just.
Oh, there he is.
There you are.
Okay.
There you are.
Never mind. Sorry about that, Ira.
Oh no, you're good. I think what ended up happening was I clicked on a link and it showed up as Joel's name. And so I just renamed myself. So I think that I was here during the whole call. So thank you all for having me here. My name is Ira Coyo Martinez. I use he, him, and el pronouns. I'm the policy associate at PECUN. And today I wanted to talk to you all about one of our legislative priorities for this session, which is HB 2358, farm worker overtime. As this is a policy that came out of our 2019 annual convention, where our membership was asking questions around why aren't all farmers providing overtime. They're also starting conversations around California already offering overtime, but that's not the same case here in Oregon. And so that is how this concept originally began. And as we've seen over the last year with the pandemic, the wildfire smoke, and more recently the winter storm, farm workers continue to be out in the fields working and making sure that there's food on our tables and in our stores to continue eating and feeding ourselves. But at the same time, farm workers aren't afforded this overtime right that the majority of other workers are. And this stems from a really racist exclusion in 1938 when they were drafting the bill under FDR, the Federal Labor Standards Act. And a lot of Southern legislators were arguing against farm worker, or including farm workers in their overtime protections because the majority of those farm workers were African American and Black laborers. And so they wanted to continue maintaining this control and exploiting this labor that's really stems from slavery and Jim Crow law, and we continue to see the effects of it today, where farm workers aren't afforded that overtime right, and continue to be one of the lowest paid workers in a pretty dangerous field, and when they're exposed to a lot of extreme weather events, as we've seen over the last year, also tend to not have healthcare insurance, and also tend to not speak English as their first language. And so there's a variety of issues when it comes to the farm worker community. And by bringing forward farm worker overtime, we think it's one step closer to addressing a lot of the systemic issues we're seeing with our community members, and really trying to bring justice and knowing that equal is equal. Farm workers shouldn't be treated as second-class citizens, and we need to continue bringing to light what racist realities really existed back in the day. The arguments that was used on the floor that were explicitly stating how white folks should not, or Black folks should not be paid the same or have the same economic standing as white folks. And now we see the majority of farm workers being immigrants from Latin America and the Caribbean. So that's one wanted to bring to y'all's attention. This is our take-home policy for this legislative session. We had a public hearing on the 8th, so about a week and a half ago, and it went pretty well. I think as we expected. There's a lot of opposition from the agricultural industry who do not want to pay for that overtime, and we have a second public hearing scheduled for this upcoming Monday, the 29th, and this work session scheduled for the 7th. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have, or if there's anything I miss, please feel free to ask.
Could you quickly go over your other bills too, Ira? I was hoping we can get through all of y'all's bills that pertain to farm workers, and then we can do Q&A afterwards.
Yeah, so one of our other legislative priorities was the Just Enforcement Act. So that was 2205, which was going to allow workers to bring cases on behalf of the state to respond to labor violations. Unfortunately, that did not get out of the committee, and it's going through a work group instead. So we'll have a bill number attached to it by the next legislative session. So that was our other main priority as it relates to workers' rights. Similarly, we're also supporting the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity campaign, as Oriana talked about earlier. And so those three bills we're also providing support. We're partnering with CAUSA and other immigrant rights organizations to extend the earned income tax credit to ITIN filers. so that they are able to access this tax credit and provide more financial support to our immigrant families that have been excluded from a lot of the financial stimulus packages that the federal government has passed. And there is also childcare policy that we're partnering with Forward Together. I have a little bit less information. I've been working less on that policy. So apologies that the bill number doesn't come to my head right now, but yeah, and we're also supporting all of the different Fair Shot Coalition agenda items, which includes the Sanctuary Promise bills, and as well as the Justice for All bill. Again, apologies, they aren't right here in front of my face, but we are supporting a variety of different bills. And again, if folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them and also look for those bill numbers as it pertains to the Fair Shot Coalition or the child care policy.
Any questions for Ira?
And so I just wanted to briefly mention, so the universal representation, which is on the Fair Shot Coalition agenda item, is HB 3230. The Sanctuary Promise Act is also on the Fair Shot Coalition agenda, and it's HB 3265. And the Justice for All bill that I mentioned was HB 2169.
Thanks, Ira. Yeah, I was just hoping you could talk a little bit more about, I think the bill regarding overtime makes sense, right? It's long overdue. I mean, that's like a really racist and awful history that's been in place, as I mentioned earlier, since the New Deal was enacted back in almost 100 years ago. But the Just Enforcement Act is a really interesting piece of legislation that sort of gives more power to workers. So I was hoping you can talk to us a little bit more about the Just Enforcement Act.
Yeah, so the Just Enforcement Act this is the second time we've introduced it in the legislature. I believe the first time we brought it forward is in 2019. Unfortunately, that did not move forward either. We took a different approach this time in making sure we were trying to be really intentional about what kind of cases are able to be brought forward. So we weren't trying to, so like if a worker experiences wage theft and for instance, BOLI, the state agency that does the investigative process to solve the wage theft claim and issue, if they for some reason do not have the capacity to pursue the case or continue with the investigation, the worker, under this Just Enforcement Act bill, the worker would be able to either bring the case forward on their behalf or partner with a community organization like PICUN or the Northwest Workers Justice Project or any other organization that they feel comfortable with and have an established relationship with, and bring that case forward through a judicial process on behalf of the state. And there could be multiple workers who file suit if there's issues like labor violations and issues happening to a variety of workers, or it could be just one worker. And if they decide to go through like a community organization or a union, they are able to stay anonymous throughout the process. So there aren't, and there's also retaliation protections in case folks, are intimidated or scared to come forward, because we know these are very challenging steps to take when it comes to advocating for their own rights, claim their wages, or reporting labor abuses. This wouldn't the concept wouldn't cover like small violations like a typo on a check or not having a certain poster in their workplace, but really trying to tackle one of the more more pressing issues, more issues that like really impact workers. And the other thing to mention is that folks would, so if like a worker brings the case forward and it goes through the judicial process and the court finds that the worker is right and the laborer didn't pay their wage or was abusing their labor, there's a violation. So what would happen is the worker would actually get 30% of whatever the case ends up, whatever the case ends up deciding that the fee is. So 30% would go to the worker and 70% would actually go back to the agency. So we saw this as a revenue generator for the agency to continue building their enforcement capacity and continue educating workers on what steps that they can take to address these issues. We understand that BOLI has not have the most resources to pursue every single case that comes to their front, and this bill would have allowed to bring more revenue to continue the enforcement capacity, and our workforce continues to get bigger and bigger. So we have to be really conscious about how we're addressing these issues. You know, these labor violations continue happening, but they all do not follow through with the case, like to resolve the cases. And again, this isn't like adding any new laws to the book. It's rather just enforcing the laws that already exist. So it wouldn't penalize, companies that are doing the right thing and not breaking labor violations. This is really tackling the companies and businesses that don't know that they could get away with it. They know that they could pay for the fees and rather than pay the workers the fair wages that they deserve. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more about the Just Enforcement Act. We really see it as a bill that advocates for workers' rights. And it doesn't just limit it to farm workers, but any type of worker that has a claim would be able to bring a case forward if this bill passes. And now now that's in a work group, we're really hoping to establish really clear guidelines and solutions to make this a bipartisan solution in the next legislative session.
Thanks so much, Ira. Any thoughts or questions from task force members? This is a really exciting piece of legislation. I've been following it since its inception, and I think one of the great things about this piece of legislation is that it gives fines to businesses based on how they're responsible and what their capacity is. So smaller businesses would pay smaller fines, and of course, the big, large, multinational corporations would pay larger ones. I mean, currently as it stands, there isn't much difference in terms of fines for business, which is why we see these large entities. They'll eat the cost, right? They say, okay, no big deal, $100, $1,000, $2,000. We'll continue to do what we need to do because it costs them more money to do the right thing than to pay a few fines. And I also just, this is an exciting bill too, just because it gives more power to workers, right? As we heard from Michael just now, only 2 to 2.5% of businesses are inspected, and the capacity to enforce all of these laws is limited. So this is a really exciting piece of legislation. Anything else you want to share with us, Ira? Or
I don't think so. I think, like I mentioned, all the bills that we're supporting this legislative session, partnering along with other groups that you've heard from, like Verde and Beyond Toxics and other folks. And yeah, so we look forward to continue these conversations with the Just Enforcement Act. It is a really exciting bill, and I think a step towards, again, addressing a lot of the systemic issues we're seeing in the state. The other bill that I just want to briefly mention too that we didn't get to see move forward is the one to protect outdoor workers from exposure to wildfire smoke. That was one that was introduced by Representative Dexter. 2813 was the House bill number. And this bill, again, unfortunately didn't pass, but it's bringing to light a reality that we saw last summer with the wildfire smoke and workers not having the protections that they needed to continue working in these conditions. And so we're in continued conversation with the representative and also with Oregon OHSA and their rulemaking process with regards to wildfire smoke and excessive heat. So that's the last thing I wanted to mention before, if any other folks have questions or comments.
Last call for questions or comments before Ira goes on with the rest of his day. Great. Thanks so much, Ira. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. And please let us know if the EJTF can support y'all by providing, testimony at any of your upcoming sessions. Like I mentioned before, while we can't directly support in favor or against bills, we can provide context, and we certainly have a lot of context, as you've heard today and tuned in around farm worker issues. So let us know.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. As I mentioned, we do have a public hearing for this Monday. And so folks understanding that you can't take a position, but if folks can continue adding the context of, this exclusion, the roots of it, and how, equity really plays a center role of this policy and bill. So that would be really appreciated. Again, the bill number is HB 2358, and the public hearing is Monday, March 29th at 3:35 p.m.
Thanks, Ira. Appreciate it. I think that's everyone we have for community updates. Am I correct, Amira?
Yes, that's right.
Great. Okay. Any thoughts or reflections from task force members about some of the bills we heard from community advocates before we move on to the rest of our agenda? Okay. In that case, we are super close to being finished for today. I believe we are now on to EJTF business. Is that correct, Amir?
Yes, that's right. And I think we had calculated for there to be more time in case we didn't get all to all the agencies yesterday.
Oh, that's right.
So we're actually ahead of schedule. So if there's any task force business that wants to be discussed, and I don't see, and then we have, I think, a little bit of time for public comment.
Right.
Starting at 11:45.
Okay. Sounds good. And then I don't think we ever put a call out to agencies to see if anyone else needed to go. So maybe I'll do that real quick to see if there's anyone on the line that didn't get a chance to provide an update yesterday, if you'd like to provide one today.
Yeah, if there's a way to, for agency folks that didn't go yesterday, just indicate either by raising your hand or throwing it up in the chat that you have an update. I am not seeing anyone.
Yeah, me either. Okay. In that case, we've got about half an hour to go over EJTF business and updates. So I know that Bob and and Jim have some things they'd like to chat with us about. The other task force members have items they'd like to discuss, just hoping to make sure we make enough time for folks if people have other things they'd like to discuss at this time. Okay. In that case, I'll open it up to task force members. If folks have things they'd like to discuss or from previous EJ meetings or, other EJTF business. I also know we have a few members that are on other sort of subcommittees, that they attend in between meetings. So it would be great to get an update from folks about those meetings and activities. Bob, I know you're on a few.
Yeah, can you hear me? Joel, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. There's a couple things going around with the indirect sources emissions for neighbors for cleaner air, and it's a well-defined fight on indirect sources. It's one that has a big implication for environmental justice because a lot of things are indirect that affect our communities, and over time, they accumulate and bioaccumulate and affect our vulnerability. So it's going to be very hard to have climate justice legislation without getting on top of indirect sources. So that's come up, and they speak for themselves. I invited them, but they've been busy with other things. There's been some discussion about 2 vice chairs. That sounds like that's the way the legislature subcommittee structure is. And that's all really I had. So.
Great, thanks, Bob. Anyone else have any updates about any subcommittees they're serving on? Okay. Amir, I know that you've been running a climate committee that's been meeting intermittently from an interagency climate work group. I've attended a few meetings, but I haven't been able to go to all of them. Is there some updates you can provide to us around those groups?
So the interagency work group had their last meeting for the time being on March 11th. That group was formulated out of the Executive Order 20-04. And so that kind of had a timeline on it, and they only were supposed to meet up until the EO deadline. That group may continue if 286 passes, where they're supposed to meet at least annually. And then the report is being put together by myself, hopefully, and hopefully I can reveal that report in time for Earth Day.
No, I know we have. Oh, thank you. I know we have representation, I believe, Amira, on the Global Warming Commission. Bob, have you been going to those, or Amira, is there an update you can provide us on the Global Warming Commission?
Bob, you're on mute if you're trying to say something.
I have not been going to the Global Commission. It'd be nice to have someone there. It's a battleground, but working with the interagency folks has been quite rewarding. Amira's been able to get work product out of some confused and nervous state agencies about this issue, and got a lot of work out of them. And there's been a lot of excellent discussion from that. What was interesting to me was that the agencies that had done their EJ reports we're ready to go and we're really on top of things, and the agencies who were supposed to and hadn't were really behind. And we can actually see that in some of the testimony we had here yesterday. So we have improved the ability of the state agencies, I think, to begin a climate resiliency and justice program through interagency. But the greenhouse gas prong of EO 20-04 is someplace we haven't gone before. And I've come in conflict with that in a Cleaner Air Oregon situation where they were supposed to be doing reports for the community groups, and they produced a report that was all greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll get to community later. So I'm concerned about our presence there, Joel. I can't do it, but it'd be nice to have someone in there from EJ that could do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And correct me if I'm wrong, Amira, but we do have a spot on there, don't we?
On which
Global Warming Commission. I remember I used to get invites to those meetings. And that's a question I think I have in general. That's one thing I was hoping we could talk about today is there's like interagency groups, there's Global Warming Commission, there's all these like subcommittees and 1,000 Zoom meetings that we're all a part of on a day-to-day basis. And on the one hand, it makes it easier to participate, right? I think before COVID, there was a tendency to have in-person meetings, and if you were to attend virtually, it was really difficult to participate, right? You either had to do it over the phone, and everyone's in person, and it's not quite the same as being there together. But now that we're all forced to be in this virtual space, it has made participation on a larger scale and more geographic diversity possible. But the bad thing is that it's really easy to put together a meeting with a bunch of people and not have to worry about the logistics of being there in person. So I'm just curious, Amir, like if there's a process, or even other task force members, so there's a process we can go through to sort of track what other meetings or other places that task force members are being represented at. Because I know we get requests to be part of things sometimes, Amir, and I'll be honest, it's difficult for me to track sometimes where we all are. I imagine it is for you too, given limited capacity.
Yes, there isn't really a system to track what all the groups are doing in one space. You just kind of have to go to each group's website and look at like the meeting minutes and the agendas to figure out what they've been talking about. But there isn't something in like one spot to see across all the committees what folks are working on.
Other task force members have thoughts on this?
Well, part of my thoughts might be is to talk about where we have to cover and what the transition might mean if it occurs to a new agency, and kind of start to think of some transition planning if that occurs. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if we are going to be moving, and if we could do things differently or lay out a new baseline, what would be some of the things that we would like to do? I would like to think we're somewhat in control of our new destiny, whatever that may be. But unless we maybe start to put things out in front of what we would like, we won't be that much in the driver's seat, and we'll let somebody else drive us to where they want us to be, rather than maybe where we want to be. So I guess I would encourage us to start thinking, and one of the agenda items was our strategic planning. And how can we use that to bridge to where we might be next, be it where we are today or where we could be at the end of this legislative session, and maybe us start to do some visioning of where do we want to go and how do we want to get there.
Thanks, Jim. Other thoughts? Maybe we can get into that, Amir. What would that look like? Let's say, right, that the bill passes. I guess what would that timeline look like, or how would that transition go down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't know the answer at this point. There is a little bit of waiting we have to do to see if the bill passes, but I really like Jim's idea just about thinking of, what you as a group are looking for in your transition and what items can be covered like during that transition over to DEQ. And for you to start thinking about that.
And within that, I'd like to share this, just my pet peeve. I've been involved in energy issues. And I would think that for us on the group, if we have certain interests in certain agencies, and I suggested this, I think a couple of months, well, probably a year ago now, is to maybe have some of us focus on areas that we're more in tune with, to specialize a little bit, if you will, because I know for me with the PUC, ODOE energy issues, they're quite important to me for Eastern Oregon and self-reliance and the new energy democracies that's going to occur. And I'd like to be kind of at the front of that and anticipating. I also just want to throw out something that I found out from the PUCs, that the utilities give their carbon reports. They're required to. We found for Idaho Power in the next 8 years, their carbon load goes up before it goes down. And many of the utilities are gaming their baseline years on the years that we were in economic decline, and they weren't necessarily burning as much coal because energy usage was not as much. I know I'm speaking more about Idaho Power and hydro, and how they use hydro as a reserve so they don't have to use carbon-based facilities as much. So there's gaming that's going on within the independently owned utilities and to get around the carbon. And I think we probably, at least me, trying to be smarter and trying to anticipate what certain entities are going to do to try to get around the carbon caps. So I'm just thinking some of those things just should be a little bit more forward thinking of what we'd like to see and how can we maybe get ahead of what's occurring. I know that's a big question, but to work smarter, not harder, if that's possible at these times.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're bringing up, Jim. I think we can start having those discussions during our during the next task force meetings over the year. And I just wanted to pull up the 2-year strategic plan that was designed a year and a half ago. And, it might be a good time to just revisit this one more time, or revisit it again and just see where we are in this process. I want to say we're on track. There are things, that we're clearly like missing out on due to our limitations around meeting in person, like having listening sessions. But coordinating on like a statewide assessment, a lot of these things that were part of the goals are kind of wrapped up in Senate Bill 286. With some like internal work that could probably be done or even wrapped up into a transition plan for how you're going to operate if you were to go to DEQ.
Yeah, thank you, Amira. I like your suggestion. I think we all should take some time and review the strategic plan And I'm wondering whether it would be possible to have it in a place where we all can make comments and revisions at the same time, so we can see what other people's thoughts are. The one concern I have with carrying the strategic plan is that we still have vacancies that haven't been filled. And I think that will be a huge priority for us if we want to really dive into the strategic plan and make things happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I just want to mention is like, I think we're probably going to take, as you all have noticed, our numbers have diminished, and we've had a few transitions, both from our advocacy commissions and also our general membership. So I think what we're going to try to do is take a pause on appointments to the task force until we figure out whether or not we're going to be heading over to DEQ. Because if we do head over to DEQ, that's going to change some things, and then then we'll have some time to go through appointments. But I think for now, at least until this bill makes it through or doesn't, we're probably not going to see any new task force members hop on.
I'm curious. I know David Tam kind of dropped off. Have we had other attrition of other people kind of dropped out?
Well, we lost David Tam. We also lost who else did we lose? Amira, I'm blanking. Tam, David.
Scott, right?
Yep, Scott too.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then Gustavo hasn't been able to attend consistently.
Yep.
And then we, of the new executive appointments person I mentioned, Sheehan, my office is going to be working with her to figure out generally what appointments could look like and the process could look like going forward. So we're kind of doing I don't want to say a reset, but sort of a reconfiguring of how we recruit for natural resource agencies overall, including the task force. So we're starting those conversations to try to making sure we're getting a steady stream of interest. And then with this group in particular, with the advocacy commissions, just making sure that there's more coordination and collaboration at that level. They have also had a good amount of turnover and changes within each of their groups as well. So that makes things a little bit more difficult.
Thanks for taking us to this reminder, Amira. I think in a lot of ways our plans have sort of gone out the window with COVID. Oh yeah, thank you, Ben, for that reminder. Yeah, the Oregon Advocacy Commission does have a new director. I know Albert just got hopped on as well. So Amira, if you had a chance to connect with the new OAC director?
I have not yet, but I maybe at the next meeting is a good opportunity to have him
That'd be great.
Introduce himself.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I know
if he's available.
Yeah, I've heard really great things about them, and so.
And then Director Melcher mentioned that 286 would be effective 91 days after the legislature adjourns. So roughly that's around September or late September. So again, I think we're on track for the most part. Some things have just been like held off because of COVID. But a lot has happened actually.
I'm curious, Amir, there a lot has. I know there's like a lot of fresh legislators, and I also saw that the BIPOC caucus is hiring a legislative director. Do you know where that process is at? Or if they've hired one yet?
I don't know yet. I think they're still in the process.
Okay.
But I did see that opening. It's very exciting to see that.
You back with us, Ben?
I've been here, but my internet stinks today. But when I turn my camera off, it allows it to keep going. So when it gets bad, I shut off. But I'm here with you.
Okay. I can hear you great. It looks like it's working now. Any other thoughts or comments folks want to bring up before we move on to public comment?
Chair Eboa, I just had a quick timeline question thinking about recruitment and capacity. Amira, can you remind me, if SB 286 passes, what's the timeline for completion of the environmental vulnerability assessment and the report that the task force or the council is responsible for?
Good question. Let me see if I can get that information correctly, but I think it's by 2024. But let me double check on that. Sorry, it's taking me a minute to pull it up. So in the dash for yeah, by 2024, September 15th. And it's no later than. That's for the environmental vulnerability assessment and the report from the Environmental Justice Council. So you have 3 years to pull it together.
Which for these projects will go by very quickly. It does occur to me though that I think, although it's also a bit of a crunch, oh wow, okay, if this legislation passes, we have to get to work right away. I think it also opens up some opportunities because it's an opportunity to get involved in like a meaningful, tangible product, and might also help us focus recruitment for the task force with people who perhaps have some expertise in putting these kinds of products together. But I think it would be good for us to be thinking sooner rather than later about what that could look like and how to discuss the opportunity, just because I think if we wait until September, we're going to start off a bit behind.
Thanks, Quinn. Anyone else? Okay. In that case, let's open it up to public comment, I think. Robin is here to share with us today.
That's my chair.
Hello. It's always so good to be in the room with this group of folks who want to do good. Thank you for a few moments of your time. as I listened, I wanted to make some comments about 2 or possibly 3 interconnected matters. The first is a relationship between DEI and environmental justice and equity. These 3 things are coming up much more in our work, our public work together. Organizations are talking about espousing these values and wanting to do something, but I think that they are not properly understood. And I would like to just observe that when I'm talking about public policy and environmental justice or equity, I'm talking about statutes and standards and legislation and administrative regulations and policy. It's very tough to talk about that band of activities if your base is human resources. Human resources is functioning, in my observation, at a level of interpersonal workplace behaviors, and that includes hiring and retention. Those are all very important, but they are a different, more internal focus than the kinds of things that, for example, EJTF has been talking about: policies, administrative regulations, standards that affect everybody, that affect a broad band of our community. So as we move forward, I'm sure that you will see and hear more of the emphasis on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think it's important that we remain committed to forums and opportunities that allow us to affect that larger public policy domain. And these conversations perhaps can be more focused on those 2 differences. And the other point I wanted to make is, in my view of the evolution of environmental justice, both here in Oregon and nationally, we began with an anecdotal history in many respects, but it was also founded on empirical data. And deepening our commitment to that methodology of accounting for disproportionate impacts is essential to taking the next meaningful steps towards climate justice. Specifically, understanding disproportionate adverse impacts, cumulative disproportionate adverse impacts, is essential to understanding what it is we are faced with in terms of climate justice and sustainability. And yet people tend to pigeonhole environmental justice into an historical set of narratives and anecdotes. They're missing the important accounting construct, accounting for what has happened to both people and the land. People lie, but the land rarely does. And so I think that deepening that commitment in the next transitional iteration of the EJTF is important to understanding what it is that we're doing with environmental justice. And that's something that the agencies, I think, also need to consider as you do your next edition of the Best Practices Handbook. It's more than participation. It is an analytical methodology that is now traveled into mapping, into interactive details, and so forth. And lastly, I just wanted to observe for you that the EJTF has crept into legislation without our being aware, without your being aware that it's there sometimes. And the same thing is happening in the Oregon Advocacy Commissions. There's legislation that mentions the advocacy commissions, but we're just now hearing about it. That's not necessarily a nefarious thing. That in fact might be a sign of success and an opportunity to request more money, more support for the work that we're doing, and recognition of the value of the work that we're doing. But I might suggest that we start, both the advocacy commissions and EJTF, start tracking in the legislative information search tool whenever our names are being mentioned, because I think that will continue to happen, and it makes it tough to track where everybody is. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Robin. Good to see you. Anyone else want to provide public testimony?
I'm not seeing indication from the attendees in the chat about public testimony.
Sweet.
I'm sorry, about public comment.
In that case, well, we can go around and folks can provide some closing comments if they'd like, and we can close out. So I'll open it up for task force members to provide some closing comments, and then we'll be done.
This is Bob. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah, we can hear you, Bob.
I got my chair back. The issues moving forward are going to be fast and furious. I think that getting some direction through the strategic planning that we did and moving into a transition plan is good. But I don't want it to, I want to know what DEQ is doing to help our transition. How are they? We like to get ahead of things, but we want to fit in well with what they want. And the sooner they know what we want, the more they can fit us in. So I'm feeling a bit of a time crunch with that. But that's my one observation. The second one is we've done a good job in the legislature this year as EJ. It's amazing. I've never seen it like this before. Washington State is tracking us kind of, is furious there. They have many, many amendments. It's a big battle and they're farther than they've ever gotten before. So we're part of a regional shift in terms of recognition of EJ. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And one thing I'd like to just mention, to follow up on kind of what Robin said, it is great that environmental justice and DEI is getting more traction, but I also think we need to be careful of that definition being hijacked to suit other people's purposes that might not be root to our cause. And I think, it might behoove us to think of trying to better maybe define it in a loose way, but to set some type of standard. Because I'm sure you've all been in organizations that have been come in and been hijacked from the outside. And I'm just afraid that this definition could get contorted to mean something maybe different than we intended. So I just I just like to encourage us to have our eyes and ears open for people to possibly redefine what we're trying to push forth. And I don't know what we can do about it, but maybe within the transition to DEQ, these are some things we can talk about, trying to standardize some things that are not tightly written, but have broad base of support and understanding. And I guess with that, I'll leave that there.
Thanks, Jim.
And I guess just my closing remarks and thoughts is, first and foremost, I want to thank you all for sending the agenda ahead of time. I think, we still need to do a better job to ensure that we can share those agendas with other institutions and community-based organizations that may be interested in participating in these meetings. And then the second thing is, I'm always glad to see so many community-based organizations participate in the EJ task force meetings, like Verde, Beyond Toxics, PECUN, and the Oregon Law Center. And I think we should continue to do that because I believe that having these organizations that work with their communities, impacted communities, can really teach us all a lot.
Valentin. Anyone else?
I'll be brief with my comments. Just wanted to send appreciation to the agency reports that were given, as well as the community orgs that take their time out to join us virtually and share some of their legislative priorities and some of the insights of some of the struggles around the advocacy work and some of the victories that are on the horizon, which is pretty powerful. And also appreciate Robert Morris Collins joining us and grounding us in some of both the history and kind of the foreshadowing of some of the challenges of the EJ work as it relates to empirical and data driven identifications of like how we actually address EJ issues and grounding that not just as a confluence of some of the other strategies that are being moved in the evolution of environmental justice. And I appreciate those and the rest of the task force members taking the 2 days to come out and really share your perspectives and your expertise.
Wanted to make sure, I put this in the chat, but wanted to make sure that we clarify and confirm the motion that Valentin made and make sure we have next steps set up. And I would just lift up what folks have said. It's been, it's exciting after a decade or so around this table. For some of us old timers have been around, aging around the table, as we say, but it's exciting to see where this work is right now and what kind of moment we're in as a state and as a movement, which is just really remarkable. And it's hopefully I'm not still around this table when that age group gets there, but that's our future. That's our future right there. So just really appreciated the agenda, the conversations. I really appreciate for the folks that are around the agency table. I feel like every year the agency kind of conversations are getting more sophisticated and more aligned with kind of EJ principles, and it's super exciting to see this trajectory. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Quinn, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say I'm really excited about the prospects for SB 286 and want to extend special thanks to Amira for taking the lead on that and helping to shape the vision and carrying that forward. I think it's really exciting. It makes me excited for the next couple of years coming up, serving on the task force with everything that's been going on. And I want to send some love and care to the AAPI community right now. I know for me personally, it has been really good to be able to focus on this proactive work and to see all of you engaged and all of us working together. So thank you.
Thanks. There's a few things I wanna quickly go over, and then Amir, if you have anything you want to close us out with too, please interject. Our next meetings are the next one is April 20th. We have a 1-hour meeting as a reminder, just to go over some updates specifically around the legislature. I think we discussed last time we want to have like an intermediate meeting just in case we need to hear things or do stuff. So that one's on April 20th for an hour from 10 to 11. And then of course you have another one on May 25th, about a month afterwards for a 1-hour meeting. And then our next regularly scheduled EJTF quarterly meetings happening over the summer in June 17th and 18th. Hopefully we're all vaccinated by then. And who knows, maybe we'll meet in person. But yeah, those are our upcoming meetings. And then of course for next our next meeting in June, for me, I'd like to see like DEQ come, perhaps Albert from the advocacy commissions, see Un, who is also the new appointments person. Maybe can talk to us next time So those are just some of my thoughts for upcoming meetings. And yeah, I think that's all I have, gang. Amir, is there anything else you wanted to say or I'm missing before we go on with the rest of our days?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for the kind words and closing us out with the statements from you, Chair, and each of you. So thank you. I don't have
Thanks,
anything
Amir.
else to add.
Oh, and real quick before I forget, so Ben's point, for the letter, is there so a team of 2 or 1 person who'd like to take a stab at that letter regarding farm worker stuff?
I'm happy to start the draft and then send it to you so you can share with other people and add
Yeah.
to it, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, that'd be great. Appreciate you doing that. All right, folks, it is 11:54. We're ending 5 minutes early today. Thanks everyone for your participation, and we'll see each other soon. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.